Okay, so we are turning our attention today to longevity with your dog, and specifically, longevity when it comes to their mobility and, how agile they are and just able to get around comfortably, which is something that as they go into their later years, and by later years, realistically, we're meaning, 6 years onwards.
What's he saying, Blinky?
You're well into them.
You're into your later years.
We've got this becomes increasingly more important. Now, there's a few things that we want to talk to you about in today's lesson. The first one is that, really importantly, we feel like when our dogs start to show signs of slowing, show signs of stiffness, maybe show signs of discomfort. First of all, that's just part of aging and we have to deal with it. The reality is that is not the case.
And I think that it's like one of those things that's just established, oh yeah, it's old age. No, you don't have to tolerate that.
No. You absolutely do not. There are so many things that can be done. And secondly, what we then tend to do is downgrade their lifestyle accordingly. The problem is actually joints are supported by muscle. And you take the example of the hip joint, and I forget the exact percentage, but it's something like 70% of the structure of that joint and the support of that joint is from muscle rather than kind of the bony joint that we all think of when we think of the hip joint. And so from that point of view, if you then overly rest a dog like that, what you're doing is they're losing muscle, and in turn that slightly malformed, dysfunctional joint that's happened because of old age is now, there's more weight on it, there is more responsibility on it, and in turn they enter this cycle of, oh, they're even more stiff, they're struggling even more, we need to downgrade their lifestyle even more. And what you see is actually our response can actually contribute to that deterioration.
Now, let's take a little Blink here. So Blink, as a young dog, had a patella operation, which effectively would have changed her form, her joint, right? That would have changed it.
The joint was actually cut into, but there was the bone cutting going on. There was a purposeful fracture done of that joint, which means that over time we're going to see arthritis set in and new bone forming as a result of that inflammation in the joint.
Now, secondly, Blink's actually having a very active lifestyle all the time. And what I noticed in the last couple of years is, I suppose, just how fantastic she still is, right? Like, she's still absolutely fantastic. She's top of her game. She's a brilliant agility champion. I won't tell them how many times over, because you're not big-headed, are you? And the thing is, she's very humble. And the thing is, Blink is on, and has always been on, since the day that we started our amazing Flexi, K9. She's been on it, and she's been on it as long as I can remember. And even previous to this, she was on another supplement before we developed our own, because actually I wanted something better than what we were using.
Exactly.
And I really desperately know that her form and function don't necessarily always go hand in hand. So her form doesn't always help her function. And I really wanted to make sure I was looking after her in the best way I possibly could.
Absolutely. And so if we were to think about what would be our top longevity tips for, lifelong mobility and feeling great and looking great.
And leading a normal life. Like, that for me was my number one. Like, whatever else happened, I wanted Blink to be able to lead a relatively normal life. She could go out for a run, she could have a swim, she'd be able to go and play with the ball or whatever else she likes to do in the field and frolic and literally be able to have a good life. So our top tips.
Tip number one would be that rest is rarely the answer when it comes to any kind of stiffness, soreness, discomfort. Definitely consult your vet about this. And also, if ever somebody suggests you kind of strict rest for a couple of weeks, your dogs can lose considerable amount of function in that time and considerable amount of fitness in that time. And so actually, what I would be asking in response to that is, firstly, is rest the right answer? Is rest the right way forward here? And secondly, what am I resting? Because if you're looking to rest a specific joint, that doesn't mean that your dog can't necessarily do other things in a controlled way. And I'd really want to establish what those are if rest really is the answer, so that I can keep my dogs nicely fit. Dogs actually lose fitness much more quickly than humans, and much more quickly than horses. And so actually these little guys, we should be really careful about resting them.
Now, our second tip, or my definite second tip for me when I'm out and about with my dogs, they spend a couple of minutes on lead before they ever get off lead. Now, something, let's take something like Blake. Blink. Blink would do a good 5 to 10 minutes on lead before she ever gets to go off lead. Like we've just said, she does have a history of an injury and therefore some changes. And so for me, she actually, you're very intense, she actually hasn't had a day of off. She's not had a day off or a day of off work, largely I think because we maintain her well. So 5 to 10 minutes of warm up before she goes off lead. She then goes off lead for as long as we might want to walk, and then she goes back on lead again for 5 to 10 minutes towards the end. So it's always that same sort of pattern. So a little bit of a warm up, some exercise, a little bit of a cool down, and back home again.
Absolutely. Now, next tip is something called a level plane of exercise. And this is so important for dogs. The dog's body will adapt to the requirements of each day. And so what we see as being really valuable is actually making sure that the level of demand on your dog's body on a weekly basis is the same week in, week out. And as your dog gets older, this becomes increasingly more important. You might have to think of day in, day out, the requirements being the same so that your dog can adapt. Now, I know you're thinking, how does that fit in the world of ditch the walk and ditch the routine and whatever else? Well, actually, fitness and exercise can take many different forms. One day it might be a walk, but the next day it might be some triple F exercises, right? Some fitness games. And then the next day we might be playing some recall and focus games in the garden. Every time you play a game with your dog, that is exercise. And so what we're looking for is the rough kind of quantity and demand being the same week in, week out for a dog under 5. Over 5, actually day in, day out, we start to consider that more and more.
Okay, next tip, and this is a really, really important one. And I've got a feeling some of you won't like me for telling you this one. I'm going to say it anyway. Don't go throwing balls again and again and again and again. The repeated sort of jarring and potential injuries that dogs get from chasing a ball on an open sort of field space can actually be pretty detrimental to their joint health and well-being. Now, we're not saying you can't ever throw something. For me, long grass where the dog has to hunt for it a bit, or maybe up a sand dune or up a hill where actually it lands up somewhere and the dog takes their time to get there and then can hunt for it a little bit. That is the type of exercise that is much more stable and much less prone to those sort of jumping, jarring, twisting, and typical injuries that we see that then lead to sort of joint issues. And actually, for me, rather than have an issue coming, I'd like to be preventative with my approach, which is why obviously Blink does take Flexi Canine, but also she doesn't do any sort of formal sort of ball training or jarring training, because we know that it just doesn't help in the long run.
Next up, get to know your dog's body. And what we mean by that is assess their structure, assess their conformation, be aware of what their areas of weakness might be, for example, that you might need to keep topping up. You know, we've mentioned Blink's knee, and that would be something that as part of her fitness plans throughout her life, that's been a component that we'd consider.
Always
Absolutely.
considered.
And so, you know, if we think about, let's take Bet, for example, I'm aware with her that she needs to have a fair bit of muscle because she's the type of dog where she has zero self-preservation and she will throw herself, twist herself, skid into things. Like there's no holding back.
She's got absolutely no. You need to stop. She's got no ability to say no. Right, like she has none. So Bet is literally Rambo. And so Tom's definitely got to almost take some responsibility there.
Absolutely, and prepare her for the inevitable, which is her doing something insane, right? And yet, you know, if we think about Bet, she's not had a day's lameness in her life except when she's taken her pads off. That is the only time she has ever shown any, oh my goodness, I have got no pads. And pads, not pants, pads. Just to clarify. And so...
Let's talk about pads and pants. Let's go.
This is something that we prepare her for all the time, and it's going to vary from dog to dog as to which we do. If I think about Magma, I'm probably going to be working on, well, what I am working on at the moment, she's in that adolescent phase. Her body's now grown to full size, and yet the muscle needs to catch up. We're going to be working on muscle building of her hind limbs, right? And so just being aware of where is your focus right now. Now, final tip, have them on a joint supplement It is a no extra time, easy thing to do on a daily basis.
I think the most important thing is that the thing you do every day that makes a long-lasting change and result. So for me, one of the things I try to do a lot more than I used to is drink water every day. It's one of those things that over a period of time will make a massive difference. Same for this. It's something you do day in, day out. It's something they get day in, day out. We don't change it. We don't add loads extra one day. We don't go, okay, it's the weekend, I remembered, let's put 5 scoops in. This is something that we do day in, day out. Now, Blink just has this with her daily intake of food. So it might be scattered on her food. It might be sprinkled over her raw. It might be in a calm mat. It might be in a Kong. It might be in a bone. It might be frozen in a bone for her. She has it in lots of different ways. Most importantly, she has it.
Absolutely. And so a little kind of tip that we have for you is we'll have a freezer full of filled bones with some of their daily food allowance in, and we'll make sure that we're incorporating their Flexi Canine, their Prime Canine.
Oh no, it's in there because it has this turmeric sort of colour, right? So it changes the colour of the food that it is with. So you're going to know it's in there. And like Tom said, I can combine it with all of my other supplements. So all of the supplements I'm using, yes, we're on Plaque, and yes, we're on Prime. And so she'll have that in with her other supplements. It'll all be mixed in, knowing that she's had her daily goodness in there and knowing I'm doing that thing every day that really does move the needle for a dog like Blink. Now, your dog might have no problems at all, maybe absolutely healthy. This is the best time to have your dog on a supportive joint wellness sort of support, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And you'd be surprised. Like I X-rayed Illy. I mean, Illy's she's definitely a senior dog now, and I X-rayed her for a totally different reason a couple of weeks ago, and one of her shoulders has an old injury. A really obvious kind of shoulder arthritis going on, definite injury that's happened earlier in life. She's never ever been lame, and she's still not lame or stiff or sore at her age, and yet you look at that X-ray and you're like, oh wow, there's clearly muscle supports that joint, because that joint would not be working very well by itself. And so you don't know what you don't know, and all we can do is we can support and help them, and you'll never find out. They'll never show signs of whatever their weakness is, but they'll be there, and that's why we have to take this really focused approach.
And the other thing I should say, guys, I don't know if you're anything like me, but I'm a little bit forgetful at making sure I've got everything when I need it. So there is an option to subscribe when you use something like this. And I do that for myself, not for my own Flexi, although you could eat it. But I actually do use it for myself. No, I don't use this for myself, but I do use the idea of a subscribe for myself because I know it's so easy for me to forget. And once I forget, it's hard for me to get back into the habit. So this is something we want to make habit.
Absolutely. You've got to think, you've got to make some things like non-negotiable. I like to drink a lot of water. I know that it's good for me, like Lauren was just talking about. I really try and drink more and more water with every week. And I know that if I, like coming here today, if I didn't stop to get a big bottle of water on the way, chances are I would forget to drink, or I wouldn't drink because it's not there, it's not easy. And it's exactly the same when it comes to making sure that you've got this stuff so that you can actively be giving it every single day. So with that, guys, be your dog's health hero, right? Nobody's going to be your dog's health hero if you're not your dog's health hero. Look after their mobility, think longevity, implement the tips that we've given you, and really you'll be surprised at how much you can influence longevity with things that you do each and every day.
Remember, game changers, whatever the dog owning struggle, there's a game for that.
If you haven't already, remember to subscribe to our channel.
And check out our new 25-day online dog training challenge. Watch the videos, play the games, transform your dog owning struggles.
As a loyal YouTube subscriber, you can get a 70% discount through the link in the description below.
And if you haven't already, subscribe to the #1 most transformational dog training podcast on iTunes and Spotify, the Sexier Than a Squirrel podcast.
And remember to follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more live teaching, video content and free training using the links in the description.